My girlfriend Katie of 3 years told me that I was easily replaceable in a heated argument. When I decided to move on, she begged to have me back. So, a little background, Katie and I had been together for 3 years. We met in college, and honestly, it felt like a fairy tale at first. We had the same interests, shared friends, and spent countless nights talking about our dreams. But as time went on, things became more complicated. The relationship started to feel one-sided. I was putting in the effort to keep things alive, while she seemed to take my love for granted. Fast forward to a few months ago. We had been arguing more frequently, mostly about her lack of commitment and how she would often cancel plans last minute. One evening, after a particularly frustrating week, I confronted her about it. I was calm, but I needed her to understand how her actions were making me feel. In the heat of the moment, she snapped back, "You know what? You're easily replaceable. I could find someone new in no time."
Ouch.
Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I remember feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. I had poured my heart into this relationship, and here she was, dismissing it all as if it meant nothing. I thought about everything we had been through, all the memories we shared, and how I had always been there for her. To hear her say that was devastating. That night, I made a decision. I was done. I told her I needed space and that I would be moving on. At first, she was taken aback, almost stunned into silence. But as the realization sunk in, she started to beg me to reconsider. "Don't do this, please."
I didn't mean it, she cried.
But I stood firm. Within a week, I moved out of our shared apartment and into a small studio nearby. It was a tough transition, but I was determined to focus on myself. I started hitting the gym, picking up new hobbies, and reconnecting with friends I had neglected during our relationship. For the first time in years, I felt free. As the weeks went by, I began to notice some changes in my life. I was feeling more confident, and I even started dating again. Nothing serious, just casual outings. I was rediscovering who I was outside of the relationship. Meanwhile, I kept getting messages from Katie. At first, they were apologies and pleas for reconciliation. "I was wrong. I miss you. Please come back." But I ignored them, focusing on my own happiness. Then, about a month after our breakup, I received a message from her that changed everything. It was a photo of her and another guy looking cozy at a cafe. The caption read, "Found someone who appreciates me." I won't lie, I felt a pang of jealousy, but it quickly turned into a sense of relief. I realized that I had made the right choice. I had been so worried about her moving on, but seeing her with someone else made me understand that I was truly free. I was no longer tied to someone who didn't value me. A few days later, I got a call from a mutual friend, Alex. He told me that Katie was going around town telling people that I was the one who couldn't handle the relationship and that I was insecure. That stung a bit, but it also fueled my resolve. I decided it was time to show her just how wrong she was. I started posting about my new life on social media, photos of my adventures, my workouts, and the new friends I was making. I made sure to keep it light and fun, but I also wanted to show her that I was thriving without her. The best part? I started dating someone amazing, Sarah. She was kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my passions. We hit it off right away, and I couldn't remember the last time I had felt this happy. I made sure to share some of our moments online just to add a little salt to the wound. Katie eventually reached out again, and this time it was different. She called me, sounding desperate. "I made a huge mistake. I miss you. Can we talk?" I could hear the regret in her voice, but I was no longer the same person who would drop everything for her. I calmly told her that I had moved on and that I was happy where I was. I could almost hear her heart shatter through the phone. After that call, I felt a sense of closure. I had proven to myself that I was not easily replaceable and that I deserved someone who valued me. It was a hard lesson for both of us, but I think it was necessary. Now, I'm with Sarah, and we're building something beautiful together. Katie and I don't talk anymore, and honestly, I think it's for the best. I learned that sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well and moving on. When I told the story to my friends, some of them thought my actions were petty and unnecessary. I would like to know your opinions on if my actions were justified or not. On to the next story. I caught my neighbor having an affair through my doorbell camera, so I decided to expose them by sending the recording to her husband. I live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone knows each other. We have block parties, bake sales, and the occasional neighborhood watch meeting. It's the kind of place where you can leave your door unlocked and not worry about anything disappearing. Well, at least that's what I thought. Enter my neighbor, Sarah. She's in her early 30s, a stay-at-home mom with 2 adorable kids. We'd shared a few casual conversations over the fence and exchanged pleasantries while waiting for the school bus. She always seemed so sweet and dedicated to her family, which made what I discovered even more shocking. A few months ago, I decided to install a doorbell camera. Not because I felt unsafe, but because I wanted to keep an eye on package deliveries and the occasional squirrel that liked to raid my bird feeder. I had no idea that this little gadget would turn my world upside down. It started innocently enough. I'd get notifications of movement, and I'd check the app to see a delivery person dropping off a package or the mailman doing his rounds. But then, one day, I received a notification that made my heart drop. It was a Friday evening, and I was lounging on my couch, binge-watching a new series. I opened the app and saw Sarah's front porch. But she wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize was there, and they were laughing and talking animatedly. My first thought was that maybe it was just a friend or a relative visiting. But as I kept watching, the vibe shifted. The man leaned in closer, and to my horror, they shared a kiss. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was not the Sarah I thought I knew. I watched as they continued to flirt, and it became clear this was more than just a friendly visit. They were definitely having an affair. The next few weeks were a blur. I couldn't shake the images from my mind. I kept replaying the footage over and over, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But every time I saw it, it was just as damning as the last. I felt like I was living in a soap opera. My first instinct was to confront her, but I quickly realized that would probably just lead to denial and cover-ups. I thought about her husband, Mark, who I had spoken to a few times while he mowed the lawn or helped out at neighborhood events. He was a good guy, hardworking, and always kind to everyone. I could only imagine how devastated he would be if he found out. After weeks of internal struggle, I decided to take action. I couldn't just sit back and let this go on. I gathered my courage and downloaded the footage onto my computer. I spent hours agonizing over how to approach this. Should I send it anonymously? Should I write a letter? In the end, I decided the most straightforward approach would be best. I composed a message to Mark, explaining everything and including the video link. I hit send, my heart racing. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I knew I was doing the right thing, but I also felt like I was tearing apart a family. I just hoped that Mark would appreciate the truth. A couple of days later, I was at home when I heard a loud commotion outside. I peeked through my window and saw Mark standing in front of Sarah's house with a look of disbelief and anger on his face. Sarah was trying to explain herself, but I couldn't hear the words. The kids were standing there, confused and scared. It was a scene I never wanted to witness. I felt terrible, but I also felt a sense of justice. Mark deserved to know. I couldn't imagine how he was feeling, but I knew that eventually, he would be grateful for the truth. After that day, things changed in our neighborhood. Mark and Sarah's family fell apart. There were whispers and side glances whenever I walked past their houses. I tried to stay out of it, but it was hard to ignore the tension. Mark moved out shortly after, taking the kids with him, and Sarah was left alone in a house that once felt so full of life. Months passed, and I often wondered how Mark and the kids were doing. I saw them occasionally at the grocery store, and they seemed to be coping. I even caught a glimpse of a smile on Mark's face one day when he was with a friend. It gave me hope that he was healing. As for Sarah, I haven't seen much of her since that day. She's still in the neighborhood, but it's like she's become a ghost. I feel a mix of pity and frustration when I see her. I know she made a terrible mistake, but I also know that her actions had consequences that rippled far beyond just her own life. In the end, I learned that sometimes doing the right thing can be incredibly painful for everyone involved. But I also know that the truth, no matter how harsh, is always better than living a lie. I still think about that day often, and while I wish I could have handled things differently, I know that I made the choice I felt was right at the time. Thanks for reading, everyone. I just needed to get this off my chest. What did you think of these stories? Let me know your thoughts about them in the comments, and thanks for listening.